All right, welcome everyone to another episode. And on today's episode, alongside co-host Bianca Leger, we interview a multidisciplinary visual artist, a creative mover, a word art enthusiast, a performer, an art instructor with an authentic style drawn from nature, multiculturalism, and identity. His unique works of art combine people, animals, and nature together to articulate diverse stories rich with symbolism and elaborate form. He creates complex narratives that acknowledge the subtleties of human nature while celebrating stories of everyday life. He's here to light up and beautify the world. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Nereo Zorro.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Welcome, Nereo. Such a pleasure to have you.
I dig the Bruce Lee hat.
Thank you. I dig Bruce Lee and his spirit that runs through us all, like water flowing.
Absolutely.
The goal of these conversations is to really uplift, inspire, and empower all listeners tuning in to move forward with greater faith and trust in themselves on the hero's journey that lays at their feet. This first question sets things up, kind of the tone, the vibration of this podcast, and it's a very positive vibe. And that is, Nereo, what do you love about your world right now? Not about the outside world, but Nereo, what do you love about your personal world right now?
That's a great question. Wow, so many ways to answer that. The first thing I can say is that I feel blessed with an ability to create, my world, to create my reality, to be able to mirror the beauty of the world and recreate it in my own way, to be yes, I would say given the opportunity to experience this life and through all the senses and be able to digest the world and then put it back out in another creative way. I feel like it's mirroring is what I do. So doing the same thing as what creator has been doing. I get to, and I say get to, sometimes I have to catch myself when I say, I have to go create today. I'm like, no, I get to do this. I'm like, wow, it's just another mindset that changes the energy that of how I approach creating. It's really a blessing. It's really a gift to be here in such, in this impermanent body, this physical body that will deteriorate one day. So yeah, and to constantly be learning.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'd like to get a better look from your lens. You're here to light things up, and there's so much beauty that you see through your lens, that you're wanting to light up, that you're wanting to mirror with your work. What do you see? What are all the beautiful things that inspire you?
Well, I'm someone who really believes in polarities and the dichotomy of life, and that, one doesn't exist without the other. So life doesn't exist without darkness, and to take in darkness, as we call it, as the muck of the world, and turn it into something that we perceive as beautiful. Like, we all have our understanding of what beauty is. Sometimes it's undeniable. Like, you look at a sunset and you just go, you go silent, because there are no words. There's just so much arising in you that but you somehow perceive this as beautiful. The same way that you look at a lotus flower, but when you go further into, say, the lotus flower, for example, it grows out of muddy water, which actually in Winnipeg has been coined muddy waters. I love that story, and I love symbolism and metaphors, but To answer your question, I would say it's the darkness of the world also that inspires me to create beauty, to recognize what true beauty is.
Mm.
You know,
Wow.
the same way that we cherish a sunset, maybe we don't cherish it as much as we truly can without experiencing what it's like to be drenched in the rain
Yeah.
and to find faces in the clouds that sometimes look grotesque, and it's like, oh, that dark cloud makes me feel something, and the thunder makes me feel frightened, and when the sun comes out, I suddenly feel the other side of the polarity. So
Mhm.
That's
I can
great.
go on and on about that.
And I'm sure we will. The next question we generally ask our guests is about their mission, and we will get to that. But I just feel what you've already presented to us. I feel Bianca has some questions for you about the lotus, the muddy waters, the polarity, the darkness and light. Those are all conversations we've been chatting about recently. So Bianca,
Yeah.
what does inspiration call you to ask?
Well, I am fascinated by artists and the way that we can use our lens to bring forth what is perceived and generated from within. You talked before we started recording about how your spirit is still landing in your body at this time because you've been traveling. I get that the impression that you have this force that is driving you forward, and that there's a lot of energy going into the processing of what is in order to bring forth what is perceived. I think that I'm just so interested in your process. How do you digest these experiences and create your art? Where did you even start? Like, when did you always create art? I mean, to recognize that your lens is that you are attuned to the beauty of the world already is maybe something that it takes a little bit of time to be aware of. At least I don't know for everybody, but we all have such unique lenses on the world. But when you realize that you see something and then you want to process that and digest it and share, when did you start and what did that process look like for you to use that ability to see something and to create and share? When did you start? Did you
Mm.
always, were you always an artist? Was that natural to you? Was it something you resisted? And we're going to go into the resistance. We're going to get there. But I am interested. I'm very interested. Whatever you feel like sharing.
I mean, we have also our definitions. We're conditioned by education to understand what what art is, what good art is, what bad art is, and
Yeah.
it's purely subjective. So when we say, when did you start painting, or when did you start being an artist, I would honestly like to say from the time I was kicking in the womb.
Yeah.
Those are like the first dance steps, and I think that we sometimes forget to recognize that art is a reflection of life, and that we are the medium. I like to believe so. So I think breath is a medium. So maybe when I took my first breath, as far as practicing with a utensil, I can remember as early as 4 years old scribbling on a wall with some crayons. And actually, I'll tell you a little story about my brother and I, who at the time you can almost look at the story and look at the both of us and see, oh, there's a glimpse of what they will become in the future or what they'll do with their life. Because my brother, who's a sports fanatic and has focused a lot of his education around sports, he was also part of this drawing on the wall. but his were all statistics of goals per average. Like he would copy the stats on the hockey cards that we would collect, and he would just write down. He'd take the NBA cards, the baseball cards, and he would just copy down all of their points and their numbers, everything. Whereas I would be drawing bears and animals and things like that. But that incident was my first graffiti experience, I guess you could say, which then propelled my parents, who were very disappointed in the fact that we weren't painting and drawing on paper, to take us to an art class where they teach you how to draw within the lines. This is a paper. This is where you draw. That wall over there? No, you don't draw. So I think when I started creating art, there was an awareness and there wasn't. And I feel like when we're children, the most honest work comes out.
Yeah.
I'd take my son as an example of things that he would create without any second thought, no second guessing. And I looked at his work, and there were some things in there that made me question who, like in all of my years of experience and in his few years of living on this earth, who's closer to the source of creation right now? Because I look at his work and it's very unhindered, the uninhibited expression. There was a ladder going into this spiral and these snakes dancing around in the sky. And I asked him about that, and he would tell me about a reoccurring dream that he had. This was when he was 3 years old. And I said, do you ever have dreams that you sometimes see over and over again? And he says, yeah, I see dancing snakes, and they look like vines, and they're rainbow. And it made me think of actually being in some ceremonies in the jungles in Peru when we had worked with the plant medicines, and some visions that occurred, and reoccurring visions for me that it felt very real to be in this dream-like state. But I could say that these rainbow dancing snakes were some images that had popped up, and so when I see that, and when I hear from him, without a second to even think about it, that's the answer that comes out from him. I think I'm trying to think less and try to feel more and return to that state of honesty, which kind of plays into this whole topic of the hero's journey. I think it's the narrative that most heroic stories are based off of. It's this idea that you leave the palace, kingdom, or queendom, whatever you want to call it, that you are born into. And by kingdom, I don't mean this physical kingdom, this palace. It's this palace that exists within each of us, that we, through our education, we kind of lose a sense of that, and then learn how to navigate through the physical realm. And throughout that, we eventually start coming back around to try and find that place that we call home, that is our birthright, that the place where we can be our honest selves.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of I'm seeing the Bruce Lee hat, and I'm thinking of Bruce Lee's interview when he was talking about how he, it's easy for me to put on a show, that quote, but to express oneself honestly, that, my friends, is very difficult to do, and it is. It's I think we like to think that we're being honest, and yes, to some degree, but oh wow, no, there's more under here. There's layers and layers that we were sometimes afraid to put out into the world. And so that is what I would like to do more so. That's taking ourselves on a little bit of a tangent here, but
That's good.
I think that answers your question. I feel that answers your question.
Mhm.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That is so great. So let's go more into that origin story. So where did you grow up, and with you and your brother drawn on walls, and like, so yeah, where did you grow up? Where did you travel?
Yeah, so my parents came from the Philippines. My father immigrated in the mid-70s. He first came to Toronto and then moved over to Winnipeg when the garment industry was booming, and there was an influx of immigrants, Filipino immigrants during that time, and a lot of them worked in that department. So he got a job in the factories, and then so I was born in '84. We grew up in the West End part of Winnipeg, and then moved to another area in Timber Park and went back to the West End, but yeah, mostly the West End of Winnipeg. So.
Mhm. And you started drawing when you're young, bears and other figures while your brother was writing stats on. And that was your first experience with graffiti. And I guess, how did your art form evolve from drawing those bears and other imagery as a child? What is the evolution of that art, and where did graffiti find your way into the journey, and what did that graffiti evolve into? Let's track the progress of your artistic expression.
Yeah. Well, after that, the little graffiti experience, when my first art class, we learned how to draw. The first thing I ever learned how to draw was a tree, and I look at that as a very beautiful symbol for the artistic path that I've been on, because I bring everything back to like literally the roots of my beginning, starting with the roots of nature, being able to recreate nature, or nature creating nature. And I was so fascinated by how, with a few strokes of a pencil, just working with understanding lights and darks, how an image would suddenly appear and almost look realistic. So we started with shading from the get-go, and I observed a lot as a kid, just looking around the room and seeing what everyone was doing. And I remember I still have a clear visual of this fellow that was drawing a tree, and he had done it so immaculately. But I remember, when you get in the zone and your head just starts going a little to and you zoom in, your eyes pop out of your head a little bit. It was one of those moments as a kid, and I look over to my brother and I can see he's kind of dozing off. Maybe he's thinking about more stats or more hockey things, but you could tell that he didn't really want to be there. I did, however, and I think that interest is what led me to further explore more. But also it was, if I'm looking back, I think it was a safe sanctuary for me to find a place in the corner of the room, sit in my little desk and draw for hours. And I wouldn't count the time. I realized it afterwards until mom's calling me for dinner. It's like, where are you? Like, just finishing up my drawing, Ma. But I found that more interesting than hanging outside and playing with kids sometimes, or playing video games. And I was always fascinated with Marvel. Doctor Strange was my favorite character, and Thanos. It's interesting about like the light and dark, because Thanos is considered this villain. This is way before Marvel movies came out, like this, we had the comics. But for some reason, out of a stack of 800 cards, I always picked out these two as my favorite ones. And yeah, later on in my life, I took on the alias Doctor Strange. But I was so fascinated, but I wasn't sure why. And I think at an early age, we we're drawn to the mystery, which I believe is what consciousness is. When you mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about consciousness, I said, oh wait, I don't even know if I know what that is. You know, I have a grasp on it slightly, but it keeps slipping out of my hands, and I think that's what it is. It's kind of elusive in some ways, and that mystery is what we're trying to capture, at least what I'm trying to capture. And when I feel I do, it's it only grazes the surface of what I'm trying to do. Trying not to try.
Yeah, and I feel that's when we're in closest connection with consciousness, is and when we allow that stillness, that peace, that quiet, that connection to flow state. That's where I find the richest information.
Yeah.
The richest remembering.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Again, there's that cyclical path of a hero's journey, is coming back to remembering who we are.
So you are now an artist by profession. Let's track how that happened. Like, and as you drew growing up, is that what you wanted to be? Did you want to be a professional artist? And what was your family's reaction to that? They're new immigrants to Canada. And from my experience with talking with people that are from parents that have immigrated from other countries, they're really concerned about security. So they want their children to get secure, stable jobs with retirement plans and pensions, and the artist life is not that.
You know it. No, it's not that, and it's not that because they don't have much knowledge of that. I think if there were more examples of people who were succeeding in that profession, of course their impression of it would change. But especially, I think in the 80s or 90s, coming off like fresh off the plane and starting from scratch, where education is not recognized. You know, you can be a doctor or a nurse and you come over here and you're in a factory, sweating balls, like. So yeah, of course, knowing my parents' story, later in my life, I was able to have more compassion and understand where they're coming from as people who would advocate for a more secure job, like an engineer, which interestingly enough is what I chose to pursue. I had a choice between taking, what was the course called? Advertising art, and it dealt with more creative work than that of an architect, but I was still fascinated with architecture. To me, it was like, well, it's still art, and I'll also make my parents happy. So I chose that route, and I studied 4 years in high school, graduated with the Award of Excellence in Technical Drafting, and then went on to take civil engineering, civil CAD technology, and then worked as a draftsman. But for about a year and a half that I worked as a draftsman, almost every day I went to work with a canvas in my hand, and on break I would be painting or writing poetry. And then I go back to work and I look around and I see these sweaty old men who are miserable, and they clearly don't like where they're at. And I thought, I'm 19 right now. I have a chance to hit the eject button and try something completely different. And I knew that I was going to upset my parents by that. They were not going to approve. Like, how does it sound to have your child, especially when there's other examples of many Filipino kids, for example, because there weren't too many Filipino kids that I knew that were pursuing the arts. Actually, none at the time, not as a profession. So to imagine what it was like to have your kid come and say, "Hey, I'm going to become a poet. I'm quitting my job and moving to the West Coast. I'm going to become a poet." What did you say? It's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. But there was something that really spurred me into wanting to do that full on, and it was a friend of mine who was an incredibly talented visual artist, and he had passed away due to cancer at a very young, he was 16. And I remember going to his funeral, and they had all of his paintings on display. And there he is, like laying in the casket in this Michael Jordan jersey. And I look around, and he's surrounded by his paintings. And I remember thinking, this kid would have done something with this art. He would, I don't know, maybe he would be working for some video game company, or I don't know what, but he was so talented. And I remember thinking, life is, as we continually find out, it is unpredictable, and it is really short. So I said, forget it. I'm going after what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get out the box a little, and that's what I did. I ended up going to, so in high school, which is when I started writing a lot, I started documenting. Well, first it started with battle raps, which was a whole nother story. I got into this whole battle scene, which I learned a lot from. I learned a lot about who I was and who I wasn't as well.
Yeah.
But that evolved into writing about things that mattered more, about social issues, about culture, about my identity. And so writing for me became also an art form that I explored, which to me was, it was like a mirror, holding
Mm-hmm.
a sketchbook or sketch pad or a notebook was really like holding up a mirror to my spirit. And it was a way for me to analyze and how to evolve, how to grow, how to track some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that I maybe want to part ways with and step up from. And I was really fascinated with the art of storytelling and how to use words as a medium to convey a story in an entertaining way. So I ventured into the world of spoken word poetry, and all of those art forms started to meld together in some way. Like even with dancing, I picked up dancing in my early 20s and thought, oh no, this is what I want to do. But I didn't seriously consider doing that as a career. But it was something that definitely helped me along the way in terms of integrating facets of drawing or of dancing into drawing and painting. So eventually I started to recognize that yes, they're different mediums, but they all merge in some way where they're one. So when I'm painting, I'm dancing. When I'm dancing, I'm painting.
Yeah.
When I'm writing, I'm playing chess, and vice versa.
What is that
These
thread?
are long answered questions.
What is the thread that ties all those disciplines that you mentioned? What is the commonality that ties painting to dancing to chess to rap battle? What is that common thread that you see that runs through it all?
I think they all have the ability to be mirrors. That's a good question. I feel they okay. Well, for example, chess has the ability, for me, the ability to reflect back a metaphorical story of life lessons, as does with writing, as does with painting. It allows me to take the world and then put it into like how I move pieces, or let's say I'm going through a life experience, and I can say this from personal experience of being in a relationship and putting everything into that relationship. So the lesson of putting all the eggs into one basket. Well, in chess, there's a saying where you don't bring the queen out too early. It's like a common no. You don't bring your powerful piece out without first taking care of your defenses. In that sense, it's there's an opportunity for me to learn more about myself and how to navigate through the world. It's like, oh, okay, take care of yourself is another way of saying don't bring your queen out too early and stack your defenses before you go out and try to take. What is the commonality? I think that, yeah, they're mirrors. They're all mirrors for me, in the sense that they reflect back a piece of my life experience.
I love that. So let's talk about someone listening, a fellow soul, a fellow human on the path, that they're caught at that road of should and must, and they're feeling pulled and stuck in the mud by the shoulds of society, the shoulds of their family, their parents, their religion, their culture, where they're having pulling in the heart, that they're wanting them to step on that path of must, and they want to step on that path of must, and become a painter or a poet or a rap battle performer, or a dancer, or a chess master, or whatever that calling is to them. They're feeling scared. How did you overcome that fear? How did fear manifest in your experience when you were that 19-year-old and said, fuck this, I'm not growing old in this corporate world, I'm doing my own thing? Did fear present itself? And then what advice would you have for a fellow traveler stuck at that crossroads?
That's an interesting question, because I want to say that it was just like, oh, it was just being confident and making that decision. But no, that confidence was actually born out of fear. So the fear of not being able to fulfill what was driving me passionately, that scared me. I didn't want to leave this world without at least making an attempt to go see what this mystery is calling me to do, which was create. And yeah, I was fearful that I would die and not be able to see what that would look like. And that just took me on this whole
All right, and you slammed on eject, and you burst into the life you are in now. For a fellow brother or sister listening that are having struggles pushing that eject button, what would you say to them?
I think it comes down to asking, I think a good question is to ask why you want to do it, figure out your whys. And is it for personal gain? Is it to help the world? Is it like, what's your reason for wanting to do what you want to do? And how much of what you would like to do is meaningful to you? And if it is not, who are you doing this for? What decisions are you making? Are they based on someone else's wants and desires for you? It's a tricky question, because I know people who incredibly talented, but they chose to not pursue it, and sometimes for fair reasons and for good reasons, because their decision was to just, they wanted to do it on the side, and they had other things that they needed to take care of, like family matters, and they saw other opportunities as a route to do that. So, but yeah, in short, I think it's understanding Why? Why do you want to do it?
And what's your why, Neo?
Well, first it was purely curiosity that and it was again fear out of what would my life look like if I did not pursue something that I was passionate about. I think my whys has evolved over time. When I was younger, I think it was more self-serving, just a fulfillment to fulfill that fear, that little package of fear that I was carrying around. And then discovering that, oh, this is actually very healing for people, and to want to share this with the world. It evolved into a selfless act of wanting to create for people. And then also there's the professional side and wanting to change the narrative also. So now I take on the role of almost I call it an art revolution, where you change the narrative that there is no such thing as a starving artist, which most people will believe there is. And that's because, going back to that, what we talked about before, is that there's not enough examples of people who are succeeding in this and making a comfortable living. But today I can honestly say, when I look around, there's so many idols that I have to draw from, and believe that it is possible. When I started out, I would, knowing that my parents had a bit of worry and concern about how are you going to make ends meet. Anytime I got a check, I'd show them that, just to ease the tension. They'd be like, arms folded and release. Oh. There's 4 figures on that check. Okay, leave them alone.
So how are you currently expressing yourself honestly? I read all the things that you are doing in the past in your bio, but right here, right now, how would you say you are expressing yourself honestly, personally and professionally, and everywhere in between?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was talking about this with a friend the other day, and I realized that as a creator, you get to create your own persona, your own reality. And I said, I'm not just an artist, I'm a construction worker, because I also build bridges. And the type of bridges that I build determine what kind of art that I create as a. So here's the thing. So when I say I build bridges, it's really just bridging different worlds. And depending on what ladder of consciousness, I guess you could say, people will perceive the work based on what rung of the ladder they are in. So what I mean by that is, when I deal with a lot of clients, for example, in professional business, they'll say, hey, can you paint my dog? Or hey, can you paint, things that we cannot easily identify. This is what it is. This is a tree, this is a dog, but as soon as I start wanting to create the mystery, like, what is that? I mean, that's honestly what I want to create. I want to create a reflection of the great mystery. And so I'll distort a face, or it'll be a bit more risky. I want to, it's like, why is that face not perfect? It's like, well, because nothing is. And imperfection is perfection. So I want to create a reflection of that. I want to paint the muck and the mud. Like, no, that's not pretty. Like, yes, it is. So when I say bridges, it's like some people want to cross this really well-structured steel bridge, and that is them asking for I want my definitive treat. Whereas I want to create a drawbridge, or even beyond that, I want to create an invisible bridge and invite you to cross it.
Yeah.
What? There is no bridge here. Like, yes, there
Yeah.
is.
I love that. So along your journey, Nereo, you've met so many helpers and mentors along that way that have aided you and inspired you on your journey. I'd like to take a moment now to reflect on some of these individuals. I know there's many and we can't go over them all, but who are some people that stand out on your path? Who were they and what were the key takeaways you learned from them that you incorporated into your being?
I would say the graffiti gallery in Winnipeg, they've been running, I think, for 20 plus years now. And Steve Wilson and Pat Lazo, the creative director and the executive director, they've been extremely instrumental in my evolution as an artist, with learning everything from learning how to deal with clients to learning basic techniques to how to be professional, how to show up on time. I think I got fired from them once. I did get fired from them for showing up late, and said, Nereo, this world moves on a clock. You got to show up on time. So yeah, I learned humility. I learned how to be more confident in my abilities. Lazo was definitely someone who took me under his wing and showed me so much. These are local Winnipeg artists. Kasha Koza also, as someone who's like a trailblazer, who really is his own. He's one of the most unique individuals that I've met in my life. That I think he's being honest with who he is and all of his darkness and all of his light. You see it all into the work that he creates. And I admire people like that who are not afraid to be themselves, regardless of what people say. And, because I know that he might rub some people the wrong way, but he's living his life. He's being him, I believe. I mean, there's other international artists that are out there that I've never met in person, but definitely inspire me as far as techniques. Human, Faith 47, Dime, the 3D artist, Os Gemios, the twins. Who's that fellow? David Cho, the Korean. He's also somebody he's himself. He's not afraid to put himself out there. And then a lot of the greats like Michelangelo. There's so many to name. Mm-hmm. But my favorite artist is the one that swishes clouds around and says, no, I don't like this song. I add some pink hues in there, and then I'm gonna sprinkle some rain, and then I'm gonna grow some seeds and flowers and blossoming flowers out. I throw in a few bees, some pollen. That's the greatest artist of all time.
Mm-hmm. And from what you've learned so far, who/what is that? Beautiful. Another great inspiration of yours is your son. Let's talk about being a father. What have you learned from that part of the journey?
Oh, wow. Okay. In my younger 20s, I was getting into a lot of trouble. And this is the graffiti days when we would sneak into the yards at 3 o'clock in the morning and go on a mission and climb buildings and fire escapes and just living day to day, not really caring about future plans and RRSPs and things like that. I remember sitting in a cell for an incident that I had done. So this is going back a little. This is a long answer question for you, but my father and I, we kind of fell out. We didn't have a good relationship for a while because of certain things that he was in denial about that was causing a lot of trouble to the family. And we didn't talk for about a year and a half. And at the time, we were still living under the same roof. And I think how I internalized that and how the outlets that I found a way to, the outlets that helped me get those emotions out weren't always, I would say, in the healthiest manners, and the decisions that I was making was kind of skewed. Like, I remember there was a point where I said, I'm done with rules. I'm done with the shoulds and shouldn'ts, and I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And if I feel like I want to do that, I'm going to do that. And I truly was living that path. Around the same time, I discovered who Hunter S. Thompson was. I had his autobiography. He's like the bad boy of American journalism, and the stories in there were just crazy. I thought, there's no way this guy lived his life like this. But there was a time I came back from a trip and I landed in the airport, and I was talking with a friend. We were sitting in the parking lot, and I stopped him midway in the conversation and said, I don't know why, but I feel like taking that wheelchair to my art studio and painting in it. He says, you're crazy. I'm like, I just feel like doing it. And so I did. I took a wheelchair, and I'm like, I want to know what it's like to be in a wheelchair and go on a bus. So I did. Broad daylight, when I was out of my mind, I painted a police cruiser with the words oink oink because of some other incident that had happened, just because I felt like it. And of course, I get slapped on the wrist. An hour later, they track me down. But all this to say that around that time, I didn't think so much about being a parent. And I thought I actually didn't think I was going to live past 30. And one of my idols, Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was an incredible artist, but at the same time, I don't think he was happy. He's drawing millions for his paintings, but he was out. He joined the 27 Club, and I thought I would be one of those people. And instead, there was other plans for me at 27. Instead of dying out, I had a son. And so thus began a whole other journey of being an artist and what that meant to be a father as well, and to bridge those two things together, because I felt this actually is the highest form of creation. And for me, it was because it meant that I'm creating something that is continually going to be created.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things shifted from there about my approach to art. Like, I used to create in chaos, and that was my sanctuary. Like, oh, I have to be high. I have to experience chaos in order to create. But no, you don't. That's a story that you're replaying for whatever reason you choose to believe in that story. It's like, no, you can create in an orderly fashion and still create beautiful work. No, you can take care of your health and still create beautiful work. You don't have to create out of destruction. It doesn't have to be your muse. And yeah, I started changing. It's like from that point on, I couldn't stand any mess in the house. It's like, I don't know where my tools are now. And like, I got adjusted to being more organized, more professional. And I would say my son was a big influence on that, because I had a choice between, I'm going to choose a different profession, or I'm just going to go deeper into the rabbit hole with this. I'll send you a picture later, but there's a picture of my son holding the paintbrush when he was like 2 years old. and I was carrying him like a paintbrush, and I was
Oh my
painting
gosh.
him.
Oh my gosh.
It was a portrait of him,
Yeah.
but he was painted.
Wow, such a special memory. So, as an artist, undoubtedly, and as a creative, undoubtedly, you come up against resistance where you do not feel like producing or the inspiration doesn't come. So, how do you deal with that resistance, that thing that stops you from creating or going out and allowing your light to shine?
Mm. I think this also is coming back to the why I'm doing this. And when I recognize that it's not just for myself, I get a little bit of a spark again. Yeah, I don't feel it's purely just for entertainment's sake. I feel that I really do believe arts is like a form of meditation. And even doing community work with the arts and seeing how the response has been, like we had a project in the youth corrections. We were doing a project called Blueprint Pathways. I was with the project for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And in seeing how through the arts and through creating safe spaces where they can express themselves, honestly, that was the goal. I would see the connections that were born out of that, the bonds that some of these kids would have after being in a space where you could be vulnerable enough to express all of yourselves, your shame, your guilt, everything. And whether you were expressing it through your words or putting it down on paper or rapping about it, they were all tools that allowed them, and it continually allows myself to go deeper into, just uncover more of the muck and grow flowers out of them.
It's beautiful. I feel it's so important to remember your why. And if you don't know your why, it's a great place to start for those listening. It's something to get clear on. I would now like to talk to you about love. From all you've learned and all the travels you've done, the people you've met, the paintings you've painted, the visions you saw, what does love mean to you?
Well, you got me stumped there.
Big question.
That's like asking what consciousness is. Yeah, I feel it's everything. I feel it's the driving force for everything that we do. I think it's the greatest form of currency. It's also the medium that you know how you were asking earlier, what's that thread
Yeah.
between everything?
Yeah.
I feel we found a winner.
Beautiful. So much wisdom shared, Nereo, that I'm so grateful that we've created space for this conversation. And you've been so gracious with your time and all this wisdom shared. With every episode, we close with the final 3 questions. And this is now that time. And the first question, I'm hitting it off of the bang. If that last question was big, this was even bigger as we escalate this. So much wisdom shared through it all. What do you feel has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path that you feel called in this moment now to share?
The greatest lesson. Oof.
That you feel called to share in this moment, based on our conversation, based on your feeling right now.
Oh, these are really good questions. I know when they're really good questions when I don't immediately have an answer for them.
Live all the time.
Well, I can say right now, a lesson is to be compassionate with ourselves, because these lessons will keep coming in, and yeah, to be humble, to be with the humility of not knowing everything about this grand mystery. I think also, you mentioned stillness. Stillness is a very important lesson in all of this, because I feel like that's when all the wisdom starts pouring into us. Out of that nothing, all the answers that we ever need reveals themselves, and that palace that we were talking about on the hero's journey.
It's all here.
That also here. Exactly. It's all here.
To surrender, to fall back into. In 3 words, how would you describe the experience you were having on Earth? In 3 words, they can be separate words, but what are 3 words that would describe the experience you were having in this reality plane?
Can't find words.
Is there a sound?
A sound. Sweet home. I don't know, but it's pretty cool being here. It's a cool place. I like it a lot. Yeah.
The final question. We've been playing around with time, and I believe you're all magicians. We've examined your past and what brought you to this now, to this moment, this infinite we stand upon. But let's fast forward. Let's transport us into a future time, and we're going to be alongside an 85-year-old Nereo Zorro. Who is that 85-year-old man? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What is the legacy that you've left here on your time on Earth? And what is the dominant feeling that occupies your space?
Oh, that's an interesting question, because yesterday I was snooping around for different answers of consciousness, and there was one video that was talking about replicating consciousness or emotions, as far as like future technology and robotics, and some people believe they're already there. And I mean, looking around already in Winnipeg, they invested in the Boston Dynamics robotic dog that can surveillance everything. They have traffic stop robotic cops that will come up to your car and issue a ticket. Japan's got these lifelike human bots, and you now see robots that are able to recreate and artworks to a T. So it saves a lot of time for people. And I think as an 85-year-old Nereo Zorro, I believe from where I'm standing now that I'm going to be a little bit of a rebel in one of those people who are preserving nature. You ever see Blade Runner? Sometimes these
Yes.
movies, these artists paved the way for these tech guys to come and like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
create that. You know, like back in the day, a swipe screen or video call was not possible. Remember Demolition Man, the year was 2014. And you look at that, wow, that's fascinating. And then we get here and it's like, eh. So what's our next eh? Is it flying cars? I mean, that's already being built. You see people with jetpacks. So I think I'm still gonna be that little wizard with the brush that, and people are gonna be so fascinated by that
Mhm.
30, 40 years from now. Like, wow, he's doing all that by hand? You know?
Yeah. And who are you surrounded yourself by, and where are you? What is your environment that you?
I'm surrounded by some invisible, I got an army here. You can't see them, but they're all good people and they're really, really old. Um, but yeah, I love surrounding myself with other artists, other creatives, with yogis, with martial artists, with people, just people, good people in general.
Mhm. And then the dominant feeling that you feel in your heart as that 85-year-old Nereo who've been experienced so much.
Even more of an honest scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm
I would
gonna
like,
have a big long white beard and some long white hair. It's already started.
yeah, I'd like you to sit with this 85-year-old man for one moment longer, feel into his heart, his soul. And I'm going to bring us back. I'm going to bring us back to the current day, this moment, here and now. And that 85-year-old white bearded man, hair all gray, sends you a message. What message does he whisper into your ear?
You're doing good. You're doing really good. And we'll meet someday. But don't rush. Don't rush. There's no rush in us meeting. Take your time.
Mm-hmm. Aho. That's some advice we could all heed. Thank you so much, my brother. It's been an honor. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
both.
I'm going to send it to Bianca for closing words on this conversation.
I'm just basking in this energy. I feel so grateful to share space and for you just sharing yourself with the world. It is very inspiring. Really, truly, it is truly inspiring. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
For those wanting to connect with Nereo, they can find you on your website, nereozorro.com. That's nereozerro.com, or on Instagram at scenario. SCENERE with a 0 or with an O. They'll bring you to your art page and to your personal page. Is there anywhere else people could come find you and connect if they're wanting to learn more or commission you for some work or collaborate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm always open to collaborations and everything. Just I'm open. So yeah, find me, or I'll find you.
To close every conversation, we bring our fists in together in unity,
Hey,
the winner
hey.
circle, a step in, boom. Cheers, brother. Much love to you. Thank you for your time.
Much love to you both. Thank you so much.
I'll see you on the path. And that is a wrap on today's conversation.